Welcome to FootballDiscovery.com. My name is Derek McCarthy, and this week I sat down to speak with coach Iain Brunskill. Iain's 20-year coaching career has seen him go from the Liverpool FC Academy all the way to successfully guiding the Jordan under-23 national team to the Asia Cup in China this January. In between, he's been a first-team coach with Blackburn Rovers, an under-23 development coach with Bolton Wanderers, a manager in Malta with club side Florina FC, and a coach educator with the English FA. As you can imagine, he has amassed a mountain of knowledge working alongside the likes of Steve Highway, Sam Allardyce, Eric Black, Neil Lennon, just to name a few. I began by asking Iain, how did it feel as a young Everton supporter being scouted by Liverpool legend Kenny Dalglish and joining the Liverpool Academy? Sit back, relax and enjoy. Semper Decentes.
Well, actually, yeah, I was an Everton supporter. We were all, the family was big Everton fans, but I played in the same representative team, league representative team as Paul Dalglish, who's obviously, Kenny's son. And even though I was an Everton fan, I always wanted to. My best mate was a Liverpool fan, and I always liked Kenny Dalglish, even though I was an Everton fan. And then when he sort of approached me through one of the other coaches who worked at the Centre of Excellence, as it was back then, Hugh Macaulay, to go and join them and go and join the Centre of Excellence. I was 11, first year of senior school. I think we only trained once a week in a gym on a wooden floor inside a high school. So that's how that started. And then I was fortunate enough then. We didn't play matches or anything. That's from I can remember. We just trained, and every now and again, I think the rules back then where you could bring kids together for a couple of days in the holidays. I think they were the rules. He's played the odd game here and there, and then that followed. Associate schoolboys followed then, so that meant that from 14 to 16, I'd train twice a week on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and then I think the game started to get more regular then. But when I say regular, I don't mean every week. And then 16, I was fortunate enough to represent England schoolboy level and youth level under 16, and then from that I joined Liverpool as a YTS, as it was back then, and signed professional on my 17th birthday. So it was very exciting. Obviously, that's what you want to do when you're a kid, but
so that's a far cry from what we currently see the system as, and one of those that you subsequently went on and coached in. Do you see that as being, did you benefit from that playing with different teams, school teams, representative teams, or do you think the current system probably has been a much better move forward for
I think, like you say, you go through it yourself, and it's not, you don't want to see it through rose-tinted glasses, but I suppose back then, the pinnacle was probably, it's when you get to maybe 14, it starts to get a bit more serious then, and then you go for the England trials. But I suppose at 11, back when I first joined, you were playing for your school, maybe a couple of Sunday teams, one on a Saturday, one on a Sunday, and then Liverpool was just sort of, that was the icing on the cake, and that was the proper. Obviously, that was coaching. You got coached, highly technical coaching, which was hugely beneficial. The people that I think it's been well documented. Steve Highway was head of youth development back then, and you had him and Dave Shannon and Hugh Macaulay and another guy called Frank Skelly who did all the administration, and they ran the whole youth system along with, I think Jim Aspinall was a scout back then, and they did the whole thing, and they did the coaching with all the age groups, the younger ones. I think, so it would be like the under 11s would be 5 till 6, and then the under 12s would be, 6 till 7, and it was just an hour. It was technique, and then it was small-sided games, and it was, I benefited from that because I was an early developed kid. I was quite tall and big, and the technical work, really obviously helped me a lot, you know. But you did get the experiences of being, if you know, at Liverpool you're one of 15, you know, at school you're the best player, you know, possibly in your Sunday team you're the best player, you know, however it works. So you got different experiences. I think a lot of the stuff, and I suppose a bit of the criticism is that, you know, a lot of the experience at academy now, even though there's a lot of fantastic work and there's a lot of really good staff and really thoughtful and intelligent people who know a lot about, not just about football, but how the way kids learn, and there's a lot more, you know, there's a lot of thought goes into it, and it's, you know, it's high level stuff, probably to rival anywhere, I would say. But you did get the other experience, and, you know, from I suppose one of the criticism is that the experience is the same all the time. But the bigger clubs, you know, they recognised that, you know, a few years ago, and that instead of playing all the same, you know, high level category 1 academies, they drop down in the week and they'll play category 3, and it's a different experience for the players. So it's not something that's not, you know, that the people aren't addressing. And I think that the level of the players, the technical level of the players is, you know, it's very high. You can see some of the successful, if you'd like, the clubs that would be deemed to be more successful in terms of developing the young players. You know, they're playing in the Premier League at 18, 19, even 20, and it's, you know, it's high level stuff. So I don't know whether it's better or worse.
Yeah, because we are on the back of a really successful summer for England at underage levels. So I suppose what you're saying probably does carry, you know, a lot of truth, that there is a lot of good work, and the much maligned academy system in America or in England doesn't carry the same, maybe that the Barcelonas and the Ajax systems seem to have at the moment.
Yeah, I think that also the success at international level has been and I don't know whether you want to call it an overhaul, but, you know, I think when you look back or you're looking back into the recent history of the top European teams at international level that have won things, Germany, Spain, you know, there always seems to be a story of, oh, well, in such and such a year we had a big overhaul and we changed it and we did this and did that. And I was fortunate enough to work for the FA for 18 months, and they'd recognise that things needed to change, I suppose. And, you know, one of the things that's probably helped a lot is something as simple as selecting the strongest group of players that you can select in an age group, rather than saying, well, no, we'll push them up to the next age level. You know, a lot of the players are playing in their right age group, and I think that's really helped, and I think it's helped over the summer. But, you know, I know a friend of mine took the under-20 group that won at Toulon, and they were a bit of a mixture. They were some younger players as well. So there's some really, really good players in England, and I think the international success at those age groups, it's, you know, they've been there or thereabouts, I think, over the last few years, and I think they've done a lot of good work's gone on. Obviously, I know Dan Ashworth's done a lot of, you know, there's a lot of stuff behind that in terms of organising, you know, the way everything's set up. You know, St George's Park is there, you know, which is a good base for it all. And I think that, like I say, there's a lot of good work and there's a lot of good players. I suppose the proof will be how many of those under-20 players that won the World Cup, which was an unbelievable achievement, how many of those will progress to play in the senior team, and hopefully they will. And I think a lot of that's going to depend on the opportunities they get at the clubs at first team level, and I think that's probably the difference between us and the other, England and the other successful nations at international level, is that they seem to be, for whatever reason, for whatever the structure is in the leagues, a lot of the younger players, 19, 20, 21, they're playing regularly senior football, and that's, you know, that's a big issue.
Will always make a big difference. So just to go back, so we digressed a little bit there from your time, but so you're at Liverpool in and around that transition time where they're going from being arguably one of the most successful teams in England to being overtaken, by Manchester United. How was that like being around the club, or do you notice that as something happening as a youth player, or is it something that maybe bypassed you a little bit?
I don't think you notice it when you're 17, 18, 19. I played for England at youth level, schoolboy and youth level with Phil Neville, and obviously he was part of that group that went on and went, so successful. I think in terms of the first team stuff, I signed professional under Graham Souness, and I think he's spoken about that himself, that there was a time with Liverpool where it was a bit of a transition. I don't think they probably got the players that they wanted to get as easily back though in those days. I think when he arrived, the squad was aging a little bit. He'd had his experiences in Italy that he tried to change, and there was big traditions at Liverpool, the boot room, let's train on this blade of grass on this particular day of the year. And then obviously everything that he wanted to implement is just common practice now. The players all eating together at the training ground rather than going from Anfield and getting the bus down every day. They meet the training ground, they train, they eat, and then they go. Those types of things. And I think that was what was trying to happen. No, not forgetting they won the FA Cup. That was just probably the summer before I joined as a young apprentice, and then signed professional later that year. But there's still some outstanding players there. I mean, Robbie Fowler was just coming through. There was Steve McManaman, Jamie Redknapp. There was some John Barnes, even though he was coming not to the end of his career, but he moved into a slightly different role. There was still some really good footballers in and around the group.
Just Man United were just very strong at that time.
Yeah, I think the younger players, the ones that the class of '92, if you like, whatever, they supplemented the top players that they had. You're talking about Bruce and Pallister and Roy Keane and Paul Ince and Mark Hughes and Ryan Giggs, obviously, Schmeichel, the top players went on to do brilliant things. I suppose there was a little bit of a shift. I don't suppose we noticed it much at youth level. It wasn't anything, the results against their teams were no different to what they normally were, really. You tended to look at Everton really more than Man United then as a youth player. That was the biggest game of the year, the 18 games, and of course the structure then was different. It was A and B team, and B team was under 18, but we were allowed 2 overage players then, and then the A team was open age, so you could be playing in the A team league. You could be playing against Manchester United at the Cliff in front of Fergie's window on a Saturday morning, and playing against Beckham and the Nevilles and Nicky Butt and Scholes and the rest of them. And then the following Saturday you could be playing on a school pitch against Rochdale reserves. So the experience was totally different, and it was tough. It was tough. And then obviously beyond that you had the reserve league, the Pontins League, which was a proper league back then, open age. I remember playing in a team as a first year sort of YTS, and it was a team that had David James in it, Neil Ruddock, Nigel Clough, Jamie Redknapp, Ian Rush. They were all playing in the reserves, and I think sometimes that's missing sometimes, because you don't get that experience. And they were good guys, so they helped you along, but you can't tell me that a young 17-year-old these days wouldn't benefit from, a young 17-year-old centre-back wouldn't benefit from playing playing alongside a 30-year-old.
Or against one, for that matter.
Yeah, because it's just a different experience. And I know it's gone, there's so many games now at the top level that they can't really, there's enough games and the squads are big enough to rotate everyone around to make sure they get playing time, but I think it's a very continental thing that senior players don't play in the second team. And okay, times are changing, that's the way it is. And some people would say, well, it blocks the way for younger players. Well, yeah, it does, but also there's still a hierarchy, and I think that's also important. Selection and deselection's part of your development process as well.
Okay, so you're at Liverpool. You're in that transition phase, and how are you finding going from being a young academy player at Liverpool, going into the apprentice system, and the games that you're having to play? Did you find that it was a little bit outside your depth, or did you feel that you were doing well enough to ultimately make the step up to first team?
I think I was in a youth international, so obviously when I joined as a full-time, like I say, YTS back then, it would be a scholar now. I'd played for England at under 15 and under 16 level. I suppose they guaranteed me a professional contract on my 17th birthday, so that was a signal enough to think that the club thought highly enough of me. And I was playing in the reserves at 16. I think I played 25 reserve team games at 16. But it was tough, because you are playing against older players and men, and I think that was a big step up in terms of that. My second year, I got a couple of injuries, didn't play so much, but no, I think it was a tough learning curve. But Sammy Lee was the reserve team coach down at Liverpool, and he'd encourage the younger players to play. You'd get games and you'd get through them, even if you had a hard time, you'd play in the next one as well, because that was what it was about, So that and you learn. Look, as a coach now, you look back at all those things and look at obviously the education you got as a youth player and as a young player, and then it moves up. And you're dealing with different personalities, and Sammy was a fantastic guy, really, really honest, both ways. If you were good, you were good. If you weren't, you weren't, and that was the way that it worked. And I think you learn from that, and you take things on board. And I always used to, when I was fortunate enough then to go to Blackburn later on in sort of coaching career, and I jumped from being an academy coach to being involved with senior players that might have, come down and played. You draw from the experience. I remember a lot of the things that Sammy used to say when senior players dropped down and played with us. He was always on our side, on the younger players' side. Even if he didn't, and he wouldn't be scared to pull a senior player up. If he wasn't doing what he should have been doing in the game. So that you learn.
All good lessons,
yeah.
But so just to try and get that transition from a player to a coach, so you've come into the end of your time at Liverpool, your contract is coming to an end. How did the club go about, and how did that feel, moving and realising that Liverpool wasn't going to be your career?
Yeah, I think you realise quickly, and what was coming up beneath me. They won the Youth Cup the year beneath me, so I was 19, done a first year even though I'd signed professionally early, it was sort of like I'd be classed as a first year professional after your 2-year apprenticeship, if you like. So a year below me was Jamie Carragher, David Thompson, another young lad back then who had a lot of potential but didn't quite get there through injury. There was another guy called Jamie Cassidy who'd been at Lilleshall, and they won the Youth Cup, and Michael Owen played as a 16-year-old in that team, and you realise that obviously they're a bit ahead of you even though they're below you, so the opportunities aren't going to be there, and there was a big raft of us that had been there for 2 or 3 years altogether that left at the same time, and that's part of it. It's part of the game.
That's
it's
part.
But you have to get on with it.
Yeah. So you then moved to Bury for a brief spell, and then you moved to a non-league side.
Yeah, League Town in the Conference. Yeah.
Okay. And at what stage did you start to think to yourself, or had you already started thinking to yourself about your coaching career or the possibility of a coaching career?
Well, when I was an apprentice at Liverpool, at the end of the season, you did the coaching badge with the PFA. So I'd got my prelim and I quite enjoyed it. I'd also started, I think in my last year at Liverpool, I started to help out with my own local village team, a team called Burscough Dynamo, quite exotic, like the under-12s. And I used to help with training and go to games, and I started to enjoy it. I enjoyed it. Back then you're just doing what you think. I then went to Bury for a year, and they just got promoted from what is now League 2 to League 1, and they got back-to-back promotions, so I didn't really get an opportunity there. But again, that's another experience. You work under different coaches. It's a different setup. Obviously, you're going from Liverpool to Bury. You're in the First Division. Wash your own kit or pay the laundry lady £3 a week to wash your kit. All those things, that was never an issue for me, because it was just what it was. But it is different. It is different. And then after that, I left there, and I got an offer to go and play for a league town who'd just been promoted to the conference. And it was part-time, semi-pro, so it was Tuesday and a Thursday, and obviously a game on a Saturday. They were in the conference, and that's how it's changed now. The majority of the conference teams now are full-time, or a lot of ex-league clubs have been up there, so we were part-time. And a chance meeting, I met Steve Highway in a restaurant early on a Saturday. It's been a Friday night or a Saturday evening, sometime during my first season there. And he invited me into Melwood the following Monday because they were starting up the academy. He remembered that I'd got my prelim, and would I be interested in working in the community to begin with, coaching in the community. So that's how that started, and that would have been 1998 maybe. And I think once I started working at Liverpool, and so I was working full time with them, coaching in the schools during the day, and then in the evening we got assigned an academy team. I wasn't the main coach, I was an assistant because I was just starting out. So once that started to kick in, the football then became something that was just an add-on really. I still enjoyed playing, but it was in the conference at that level. I enjoyed playing the games. There were some good games. So I had 2 years at Leek, and then I sort of moved down then a league, and that's when I started to think I wasn't enjoying it as much as I used to, and the job at Liverpool had sort of taken over anyway. So, but that would have been, your full on Monday coaching the school all day, coaching the academy at night. Tuesday coaching in a school all day, then going to non-league training or a game. Wednesday coaching in the school all day, academy at night. Thursday coaching in a school all day, training with a non-league team. Friday coaching in the day in a school, coaching at night. Saturday playing football for your non-league team. Sunday taking the academy team for a fixture, and that was your week.
So pretty full on.
Yeah, and then once you'd realise what you actually want to be doing, and the difference between, I suppose, non-league's about survival back then. It's about just surviving the game, getting through the game. I don't think you didn't really develop as a player. You just sort of learn a different side of the game, and it was, and that sort of really resulted in me stopping playing when I was about 26. Because it was obviously, I'd got my A licence. Got my A licence in 2002. I think that's right. And then you're starting to think this is serious. This could be a career.
Yeah, you've obviously started off on a really good footing. You Steve Highway as your academy manager. What kind of influence did he have in those early stages, and even now, do you still think back to some of his wisdom?
Yeah, I think Steve was he was a major influence in changing the system into probably what you see now. He wanted the best players playing together. He wanted more access to the players. Obviously, that took away from school football and things, which I suppose is a little bit of the downside to it. But it was an elite program, and that's what he wanted to create. He was very forward thinking in the way that he worked with the staff and the players. I think a lot of the things that not just the coaching, is one of his best sayings is look after the person and the player will look after himself. And I think that he was about that. But because he was, think about the players that came through the Liverpool system when he was in charge of the youth. The top ones, he knew how to get the best out of the top ones because he'd been a top player himself. And I think that was a major factor. And if you read, Fowler and Gerrard and Owen and Carragher and McManaman, Fowler, they'll all say what a big influence he was on them because he knew how to push them and he knew how to get the best out of them, but also knew what they needed and understood them. So he would be also probably the best technical coach that I'd ever. He was still, in good shape, and I'm sure he could have still played when he was 50 odd. A real technical, he'd break down things really, standing foot, and it was a good, a real good education. And there's lots of good coaches at Liverpool at the time, and I was fortunate. Like I said, I mentioned him earlier, Hugh Macaulay, who was there for a long time, working with all the younger teams, and then he eventually progressed to take the reserve team. Dave Shannon, who initially was part-time, then he went full-time. Did a lot of fantastic work, with the what we'd call the youth development players. I felt, sort of 12 to 16, a real expert on that. John Owens, who came a bit later, was totally different. And another guy, Paul Lever, who worked. He was a PE teacher, Paul, for many years. And he started off part-time running the schoolboy programme, which was the young ones, 9 to 14s, eventually went full-time. He's now a coach educator and one of the best coach educators that the English FA have got, I feel. And I was lucky as a young coach to have these people around me, these older coaches who wanted to help you. They wanted to really help you develop as a coach, and and critique you, but in the right way. And I was really lucky.
Yeah, so you've had this really good experience at Liverpool Academy, but I suppose even as a player, that break that you need came in 2008 when Blackburn Rovers came looking for a coach, and you were in a position to take up that role. Can you explain how that kind of came about?
Yeah.
That you go from being an academy coach at Liverpool to now managing a Premier League reserve team?
Yeah, the way it came about was obviously Paul Ince was the manager of Blackburn, and Thomas Ince had been at Liverpool for a number of years, and through Carl Robinson, who'd coached at the academy with us in the community, and he worked in the academy system as well with the teams. He'd gone with Paul Ince to MK Dons, and they had great success. They won League Two, they won the Johnson's Paints Trophy, I think, and then they obviously got the Blackburn job, which was great. And Carl was a young coach then. He still is a young coach, but he called me and said, "Look, we're looking for a reserve team coach. Do you fancy it? To come and meet Paul?" Again, I sort of met him a few times, obviously from seeing him at the academy. Went and met, and that was a big opportunity, and I'll be grateful for him, because I'll always be grateful to him, because that's your, it gives you the chance to step from academy football to working with senior players. And I think my second game, this is the irony of football, my second league game as the reserve team coach at Blackburn was against Manchester United, and Robbie Fowler was in my team. So it comes full circle, and obviously he'd signed a short-term contract with Blackburn, and again, that's immediately you're in the deep end, and it was, I think, working with young players and having a lot of experience working with young players, I mean young players, where you've got to keep them occupied, you've got to entertain them, working on soccer camps in America, working in the community at schools and getting your organisational skills right, making sure everyone's involved. It helps you because you can juggle, smaller numbers, big numbers. You can cope with it because you've had all that experience. And I think working with children and then working with players, it's about your people skills. I think it's, some saying it's the same from the English FA. It's the same game, it's just a different shirt size. And I think that's right to a certain degree. You deal with the person as a person, not as a player, and you try and use that.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. For those coaches out there listening in that maybe at times think that when that jump up means it's a change in personality, it's a change in how you deal with players. You felt, was there a change?
I think you working with younger players is a bit different. Young players, 9, 10 or even younger that I was working with during that spell. They're looking at you for something different. But then you go into 3 months later, Robbie Fowler's in your team. How are you going to deal with him? It's not. It's just draws on your experience and draws on your ability to deal with people. And I remember how I dealt with it, and I'd thought about it, and I asked his opinion at half time, and that was how I dealt with it. And he said, "Yeah, lads, we're doing great. This and this and this and this." And he didn't talk for long, and I think he was probably not been asked before, so I think it was a little shock to him. But and then I think you can build up a rapport with the senior players. You understand that they're there. They're probably there to get, because they're not in the first team, or they're getting some conditioning. So you have empathy towards that, but also you've got a duty to the younger players that are playing in your reserve team to make sure they get the best out of the situation. And I was lucky that a lot of the players that dropped down when I was at Blackburn, senior players dropped down, were fantastic. Michel Salgado, before he played in the first team, played in the reserves. He was great, really helped the kids. Jason Roberts was very good, David Dunn, Benny McCarthy, Elad Diouf was fantastic. And I think it comes from just making them feel comfortable enough that if the situation's bad for them, if they've been dropped, or you understand that, and you're there to help them, and but obviously then you're looking for them to help you too.
Yeah, as you said, your people skills. So Paul Ince didn't last long for you after bringing you in. Then Sam Allardyce comes in, and he's probably arguably a change from your current experiences within football. The Liverpool philosophy of passive move. Sam, maybe a name for being a little bit more direct. Did you see that as being an issue, or did you just see it as working with a new manager?
I thought it was from a personal point of view, as a young coach, and he was very supportive of me as a reserve team coach, and he'd come to watch games, and I'd have the players, we'd build from the back, we'd do, trying to develop them, because there's no real pressure on you to we want to try and teach them the right way and teach them the options in the game, but we wouldn't go over the top. But he was very supportive. He would just say to me, right, who's the next one? Who's coming up? Those types of things. And he's as he's shown throughout his managerial career, he's fantastic at what he does. Fantastic with the people that he works with and his staff. Lets people do their job. But he's the boss, so I think he appreciates people that work hard on the staff side. He has his way of working, which is very successful. His record obviously speaks for himself. Who am I to even comment on that? But and I was so pleased for him when he got the England job, because I thought he was absolutely the right person. And I think he'd have been successful. I do. I know obviously Gareth Southgate's got the job now, and I think he was the right person after Sam got the job. I do. I don't think there was a better person placed to it. He knows the players. He's worked within the system. He's been a top international himself. He's a great guy. Privileged to, when I was working with the FA, to meet with him on numerous occasions and have good conversations with him. And he's a real nice guy. And I think he'll do well, and I hope he does well.
Yeah, of course. So this 2 years period with working under Sam as his reserve team coach, travelling with the first team, gaining really valuable experience, seeing how the inner workings of a Premier League, and at the time a quite successful Premier League team. And then he moves on, and you're thrust into now first team coach alongside Steve Keane, at a very turbulent time in the club's.
It was difficult, and I think also when Sam left, Neil McDonald left as well, and Neil was a big help to me too. And he was really, again, I've been fortunate. People seem to have wanted to help me, and he was good for me, and he helped me. And I remember doing my pro license, and he said, "Great, where are you up to? What's your presentation? Show me." And he'd sit with me in the afternoon, and he'd say, "Right, no, I like that. I've got this question." And he was great like that. And Steve Keane was also there at the time, and he'd be the same. And they were dead supportive, really, really good. So I've been really fortunate on that. So when obviously the change happened, and Steve asked me to step up with him, and it's been well documented what I suppose, and the troubles that went on after that. A lot of which was just, beyond football. It was just, ridiculous.
Yeah.
Steve obviously wanted to do the best job that he possibly could, and Steve's a really good coach. And like you say, thrust into it, and it was just a case of, I remember him saying, "Look, I think can you just help me out for a couple of days? I'm not sure what's happening." So that was the end of it. We actually did quite well in the first 7 games. Beat West Brom away, which was a tough place to go to back then. We beat Liverpool at home. I think Roy Hodgson actually got relieved of his duties the day after, but it wasn't. There was no coverage of Blackburn that we'd beaten Liverpool 3-1. It was all about Roy Hodgson, and I think that was how it sort of panned out. And again, I was me who'd been taking the reserves and got on well with most of the senior players anyway, and then to step up, it's totally different, obviously, because it's
now results based. Now
100%,
everything you do, and it isn't every Saturday afternoon you're going to be judged, or your weekend is going to be dictated by what the scoreline finishes by 5 o'clock. And how did you find that affecting you? Because you've now spent the majority of your coaching career in, I suppose, a developmental area of the game where you're trying to help players develop, and success is a player playing a first team football game, or getting a new contract, or moving to a new club. You're now at the other end of it, where it's extremely cutthroat. How did you transition from that side of it?
Well, I suppose that's the real nitty gritty of it is that, because the Saturday afternoon, quarter to 5, does determine your weekend, and that's the business that you're in. The highs are fantastic, the lows are, and you soon work out that you can't get too up when you win a game, particularly when at that particular time, I suppose, Blackburn weren't in the top half of the table. Most, it wasn't, you weren't a Man United or Chelsea where you're going to win every week. So you knew that, really, and I quickly learned that you can't get too high and you can't get too low. You got to maintain. And one of the best stories is that really brought it home to me was it was in the second season as first team coach, and we hadn't had a good run, and we played Bolton at home and we got beat. We shouldn't have. It it was before the Christmas period, so it was going to be a real busy Christmas period, as it normally is, and we had tough games. So we had Liverpool away and Manchester United away, Liverpool on Boxing Day and Man United away on New Year's Eve. Then we had Stoke at home, I think, on the second.
Who was managing Liverpool at that stage?
That would have been Kenny, yeah. But so leading into the busy Christmas period, we needed a result really, and we played Bolton at home, and we got beat 2-1, and it was a real blow. We could have won the game or at least drawn the game, but we got beat 2-1, and then you're thinking, oh dear, you've got these 2 games. These are tough games, but we drew at Liverpool. And we could have won at Liverpool. We hung on a little bit at the end, and then we beat Manchester United. So out of the games that you think you're getting nothing from, we got 4 points. It was actually Sir Alex Ferguson's 70th birthday, I remember it, and we won 3-2, which was fantastic. But then you can't enjoy it because 2 days later you're playing Stoke and you lose 1-0 at home, and that's it. Really, I suppose that shows you, that highlights it really. That, again, with a club that's, that we were having a bit of a hard time then, results wise. That it was up and down, but you can't get too hung up on things because there's so many games that you've got to get through it and get on with it and learn from it and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, which the next thing was obviously dismissal. And that probably brings you to ultimately what every person that works in football is going to experience at some stage or the other. And it's your Sir Alex Ferguson. But
I think what the story, I suppose the timeline was, Steve, we did get relegated from the Premier League, went down to the Championship. We started really well. We were top for the majority of the first 6 games, and then Steve resigned his position, and by then Eric Black was his assistant. It also had Paul Clement as his assistant. So again, I was fortunate enough that I'd worked with all these good people at Blackburn, Neil McDonald, Sam Allardyce, Paul Ince, Carl, and then Paul Clement comes along, who obviously had an unbelievable career and a great person, another person who wanted to help, great planner, very organised, and then Eric Black, who's had lots of experience throughout, as a top player and then as a coach at the highest level for Premier League level for a number of years, I hold in the highest regard, not just as a coach but also as a guy. So I'd had all these brilliant experiences. Steve resigned, myself and Eric took the team. We took the team for 6 games. We drew 3, lost 1, and won the last 2 with 2 1-0 victories at Ewood. And I think maybe that might have been enough maybe for Eric to get the job. The powers that be thought it wasn't, and wasn't quite, and Henning Berg arrived at the club. I stayed on as first team coach, Eric stayed on as assistant, and it worked. And that, unfortunately, that didn't work out. It was 10 games in, I think we started relatively well. I remember winning a game at Peterborough 4-0 on a early Saturday evening, playing very well, and then we struggled for results after that. Unfortunately, Henning lost his job, and the rest of the staff did also. And again, it's like you say, it's something that I suppose if you're in football long enough, you have to experience, particularly working at first team level. It's inevitable, and ultimately.
Yeah. Okay, so you're leaving Blackburn, and and a new opportunity comes, and this is probably one of those that we don't see a lot in English football. It took you abroad.
Yeah, I got the opportunity, or the opportunity was presented to me, to go and be a head coach in Malta for a Maltese Premier League team, who the structure of the league is, after the 2 rounds of fixtures, the league splits, top 6, bottom 6. The team had finished 9th, so they had 10 games, obviously 2 games against each of the other 5 teams in the relegation pool. And it was Stephen Vaughan Senior and Stephen Vaughan Jr., who were the owners of the Floriana at the time. I was grateful for the opportunity. It was sort of my first senior head coach's job. 10 games, 3 months, or 3.5 months. Very successful, really enjoyed it. We managed to finish 6th, so top of the relegation pool. We won 9 and drew 1, so it was a great experience. Loved the place, loved the people, and again I was thankful for the opportunity that the guys had given me. But during that period, I'd been in touch with the FA through an old colleague who I mentioned earlier, Paul Lever, and they were looking for coach educators, which was a totally different experience for me. And I thought I wanted to move home. Children were at home. I just met Natalie, who's now my wife, so that was just starting out, and I felt like I wanted to go home. And the job with the FA presented a new string to the bow, if you like. So I ended up that period in Malta, although successful, was quite short lived.
Probably give you your first real taste of getting yourself abroad and experiencing working in a different culture, that which we'll speak about later, has probably helped you in your current role.
Yeah, and I think you've got to know you can't change the culture, you've got to sort of exploit it, really. And I had 3 different types of players there. I had 3 English lads who were there full-time as professionals, and then a Brazilian who was there full-time as a professional. By the way, they were the 4 best players. We then had a group of older Maltese players who'd been at the club for a long time, who worked during the day, and it was like a part-time football for them. And then I had another group of players who were students. So, and they were sort of the under-21s, and they were in the 3 or 4 of them were in the national under-21 squad that trained once a week. So you try and work out what's best for everybody. How do you give them what they need? Well, the guys who are working, driving a lorry during the day, training in the evening, okay, fine. But how can we get the best out of them? So we made training shorter, more intense, and we tended probably not to train every night of the week. We'd give them a break here and there. The lads they were all good lads anyway. The lads that were over there full time as sort of professionals, we encouraged them to go in the gym in the morning, and they were good. And then the younger lads, they sort of take care of themselves because they go along with what goes on, and the results were good. And again, it's about when you home back to your, developing a set of basics that you stick to, and you keep reverting back to those, organising the team to play the way that suits the players that you've got, and keep reverting and keep working the repetition on the basics that you want from them.
Yeah, so are you a coach that finds yourself with a system? I know you've just touched on it slightly, but are you one of those that looks at your group of players and then decides what way you're going to organise it?
Yeah. I think you look at the group that you've got. I understand there's different ways of working it. If you've got a system, you can work on the system. That you prefer. But
there's so many now, I suppose.
Yeah. I think for me, it was always that job was. I didn't have time to say, right, well, I want to play this way, and this is, and we're going to work on it, and we're going to do this. We're going to do. Yeah, we could work on it, but I think it was, the little Brazilian had been playing wide. He looked to me like he could get a goal, so we played him sort of off the front. He ended up scoring. I think he got Player of the Year. Ultimately, not in the club, in the league. I think he scored 10 in 10. So, when you're building your team around that, if you like. I had another young lad who had pace, so we played him as a forward to try and stretch the team, and then let the little Brazilian Igor do his stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it is, depending on what the role is, I think you can, if you've got to hit the ground running, I think you've got to just quickly assess what you've got, and go with that and try and find a way that suits them.
Yeah. So you've come back to England, spent a little time with the English FA, but then club football came calling once again, with Bolton, or with Neil Lennon. So, and you went back into your role as a coach again. How was that? Now, so you've coached in the Premier League. You're now working in the Championship.
I think the time I had with the FA as a coach educator involved going around a lot of the clubs in the Northwest, helping coaches through their awards. I think as a coach, it makes you better because you start to you're evaluating coaches daily. You're seeing a lot of coaches work, trying to help them. And I think it makes you better. I think it helps you realise what you're about, what your strengths are, things that you need to improve on. And there's a lot of good people that I worked with at the FA, and it was a really, really valuable experience to me, and something that I would urge, if you get the opportunity to do some coach education and you're a coach, do it, because it makes you better. It does make you better. It helps you evaluate yourself quickly. During that period, even though I was working in coach education, I was fortunate enough to Neil Dewsnip, who was appointed the under-18 coach, national coach for England. They did they gave different people experience of going and working with him, which was excellent. We had a lot of the team that have just won the under. In fact, when I worked with them, I worked with that team that's just won the under-20 World Cup as under-18s, and they'd come off the back of the previous season. They'd won the Euro, so they were a good group. Dominic Solanke, Lewis Cook, Shea, OJ from Liverpool, John Joe Kenny, Callum Connolly. Lots of good players. Adam Armstrong. They're a good group of players, and they've obviously shown that. And again, my only worry for them would be how much senior football that they get now, so to keep them on to the next level. So that was a good experience. Going back into the coaching and actually being involved with a team, obviously wets your whistle a little bit. And I'd known Neil since I'd done my pro licence. Kept in touch with him when he was development coach at Celtic. He used to bring teams down to Blackburn and play us because obviously they were in the league and they wanted some good opposition. So we used to have some great games. So I kept in touch with him. He'd got the Bolton job, and he said there was an opportunity to come and work with under 21s. Close to home. Wanted to work with Neil. Good guy, great guy, good friend, and I enjoyed my time there. Getting back and working with the players, and again, you come at it at a different way, really, because you've been out of it. Now you're back into it. We had relative success. During that period, we've got Neil again because he's from that development background, and Gary Parker, who's his first team coach. They want to put the young players in, which really helps, and that's a good. That's a lot of players got the debuts, and Neil and Gary, they weren't afraid of putting them in and giving them an opportunity. So he supports the youth players. Obviously, we had some good successes. Rob Holden was someone who really benefited from it, and obviously got a good move to Arsenal, and Zach Clough got a move also. They ended up selling both of them, which at that period of time, with the well-documented financial problems, probably went a long way to keep the club going, really. So, yeah. So you've had now experience, obviously, at arguably one of the top clubs in England as a player and as an academy coach. You've then moved to Premier League club. You've had experience in Malta, club level. You've come back working with the English FA. Then you've gone back and got a taste of club football again. And then the opportunity comes to manage the Jordan under-23 Olympic team. And how hard a decision was that to leave England and come out to the Middle East and work as a coach? Well, obviously, at senior level it hadn't finished. There was a lot of problems at Bolton. The ownership changed. The club did get relegated after Neil had left. down to League One, which was obviously a shame. And also, from that point of view, it's a Premier League club that's gone down to the League One. You understand and not naive enough to think that everything's going to stay the same. So, I would quickly realise that I'd have been one of the people that, rightly so, in the position that I was, would your position becomes, under threat really. And then an ex-Liverpool colleague of mine, Stuart Gelling, was appointed as a technical director over here in Jordan, spoken to me and said, we're looking for an under-23 coach, would you be interested? I think working at international level is, it's a brilliant experience. It's something different, and because I'm in a foreign country, and you're not training every day, and it allows you to be meticulous in the way that you plan and the way that you select your players and everything that you go about, putting together your programs and putting together your training camps. So it's been another good experience. Obviously, working in an Arabic country, the language is the first thing that's difficult. I've had a lot of help. The people are friendly. The players want to work hard. The federation is very supportive of me. So it's been another great experience, and you're trying again, sort of quickly to, you've got to hold trials. You've got to plan your camps. You've got to go abroad. You've got to work with clubs, trying to get to make sure that you can get the players released from the clubs for the internationals, and even if you're doing some little one-off training days. So again, it's another. Without having the language, obviously you do your best to try and get by and learn as much as you can. But it's been another great experience.
Do you think it's something that's in Britain and Ireland that we don't embrace enough, this coming into what is really a difficult environment? Not all the other external stuff that happens outside of the world, but the language barriers, the different level of players you're dealing with, the facilities, the other things that maybe you may not have been as accustomed to in the UK have now changed. How do you think that's something that we don't do well enough?
Maybe. I think I suppose it's about adapting. Ultimately it's the same game, you would say. I think working in a country where you haven't got the total grasp of the language makes you better, because you've got to communicate quickly and effectively and not drag it on. The instructions have got to be clear, they've got to be simple. I suppose it goes back to the experience that you pull from about basics and repetition and doing the things that you're good at, and encouraging the players to do that. I think anybody gets an opportunity to work abroad that they should, because it not only is football, but the football side of it and your coaching, I think as a person it develops you also.
Really good life experiences.
You have an appreciation of what goes on, and I think that's probably what's made it easier for me, and is that if you throw yourself into it and throw yourself into the culture and get involved and meet the locals, and I think it makes a massive difference.
Yeah, so we might as well speak about it. You've successfully qualified Jordan for the tournament in China, the Asian Cup. What do you think that challenges that now brings for you as a manager, and the expectations that, in a country that, maybe haven't had success, that now having qualified for this tournament, that may have increased?
I think what we've tried to emphasise is the long-term plan of it all. So we're trying to do as well as we can. My job, I was employed over here to be the Olympic coach, which Olympic qualification doesn't happen for another 2 years, till 2019 is the qualifying tournament for that. But the players that I've dealt with now, or I'm dealing with now, we're trying to integrate those guys who will be involved in 2 years' time and give them the experience. So this tournament coming up, we're looking at it. We obviously want to do as well as we can, but we're also looking at it as a good experience for those players that in 2 years' time they know what to expect. I think when you have a level of success, the expectations rise everywhere. I think that's an important thing. And we'll prepare as well as we can. Getting a lot of support from the federation, put a lot of faith in me personally. So we'll plan as well as we can. Hopefully the players will be as prepared as they can, and it'll be an unbelievable experience in China in January.
I suppose as we come to the end of this really interesting conversation, I think I said in the beginning it lasts about 35 minutes. I think we've ran over just by a few, and it probably just highlights the length of a career a coach probably has to experience or endure to get to the top, or certainly get to the high level that you've done. Along each way of the path, you've come across different hardships, highs and lows, as you've mentioned. But what would be the key elements? I know you've touched on a few, but what would be the key things as a coach that you feel along the way that have made you the coach you are today?
I suppose I don't know the date exactly, but I suppose I'm 40. I turned 40 this year, and I think I started coaching at Liverpool at 20. So it's took me 20 years, I suppose. I'm not anywhere near where I want to be at the moment, and I think the hairs are grey, and and I think that's really important. The experience. I still speak to some of the people that I've mentioned before that I've worked with previously. Sam Allardyce, Neil McDonald, Eric Black, Paul Clement. I told Paul that was coming out here. He said, "What a fantastic experience, brilliant." I had a really nice message off Gareth Southgate, saying what a great experience, good job, well done on the qualification. So I think I've been fortunate to work with a lot of good people, and the game to me, the game's the game, I think. And lots of things have developed, and the game has become more, certainly much. The level of coverage is for the players and for everyone else. I suppose that's just society, though. That's changed. You've got to be mindful of that fact and just adjust things slightly. But I suppose, and I'm nowhere near it. I've been doing it 20 years, and where do we want to get to? And well, you want to get as high as you can and work with the best players that you possibly can. I think that's the thing. Try and improve at something every step of the way. Keep on learning and keep on developing, and if that's watching other people, you can do that. But I think getting down and doing it and getting the experience on the field in whatever form it is, whatever level you're at, the more you can do and the more you can gain that practical experience, the better it is.
Yeah. No, excellent, Ian. Best of luck in China, and fingers crossed of a really successful tournament out there. And thanks for joining us here at Football Discovery. It's been a pleasure, and I'm sure listeners will have got a lot out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.